Good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Cabrera. I am the museum director at College Park Aviation Museum. Buenas noches a todos. Yo soy Kevin Cabrera. Yo soy el director del Museo de Aviation de College Park. I'm excited to be here tonight with Captain Linda Pauwels. Linda and I are going to be having a conversation. She is the author of Beyond Haiku. And Linda is also going to be a very special guest of ours on October 2nd at College Park Aviation Museum when we host the very first Latinas in Aviation Global Festival 2021. And so before I get started, I wanted to say thank you all for being here tonight. And I'm going to introduce Linda to you all. And Linda's going to be talking today about a book that she published. And we're going to have a conversation. And she's going to just tell us a little bit about herself. So Captain Linda Pauwels is an airline pilot. For over 3 decades, she has flown thousands of hours on many types of big airplanes all over the world. Even Linda counts some aviation firsts attached to her name. At present, she instructs and evaluates pilots as a check airman on a Boeing 787 for American Airlines. Linda was born in San Pedro, Buenos Aires, Argentina. She came to the United States at age 6 after the death of her father. Having experienced adversity early on in her life, she grew to understand and appreciate the value of resilience. Linda integrates intuition and sensitivity along with a graduate academic preparation and education in her professional life. In the mid-2000s, Linda wrote a regular column titled From the Cockpit for the Orange County Register. She has been streakingly writing poems for a while. Unfortunately, the cat is now out of the bag. Linda has been married to Frederick, as also a pilot for almost 40 years. They have 2 adult children, Natalie and Patrick, domestic animals, and an Asian garden with a bird feeder. The family has a primary base in North Texas near Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, and a secondary base in South Florida near Miami. And just a little tidbit, when I arrived in College Park, Maryland last year and began reaching out to authors of the book Latinas in Aviation, one of the immediate connections that I made with Linda is, I was basically raised in Orange County, grew up my entire life in Orange County, my parents originally from Mexico, moved to Los Angeles, and then moved to Anaheim. And so that Orange County Register connection, have spent many hours in the archives of the Orange County Register and going through those things. So without further ado, I want to introduce Linda. And Linda, please share a little bit more about yourself, a little bit more about the book that you're going to be talking about, and how that all came to be. And then and we can go from there.
Well, Kevin, thank you for the beautiful introduction and for the opportunity to be here with you tonight and with all of the viewers. Muchas gracias a todos por estar presentes esta noche. Es un placer estar con ustedes y hablar un poquito de nuestros libros. I'll introduce, a little bit of Spanish and English because this is Hispanic Heritage Month. So I think that would be valuable. Just a little bit about myself. The bio really says a lot in that I have been flying for a very long time. And I started flying when I was young. I was only 16. I got my private pilot's license at 17. I did so very difficult because we didn't have any financial means. So I needed to be able to work to pay for my flight training. But I was always very fortunate in that people were available to assist me and lend me a hand. After my private pilot license, I then got the commercial license and started building flight time, as the majority of civilian pilots do, to be able to fly commercially. I was hired by an avionics center. That's a place that installs equipment for communication and navigation inside the aircraft. And that's the first small aircraft that I flew. And then after a little bit more time, I got a big break, and I was hired as a first officer, a co-pilot, on a C-130 civilian airplane. So it's a military airplane that has a civilian rating. And then after that, with this company that had military contracts, we flew all over the world, en todas partes del mundo. And I got a lot of experience. I was then fortunate to be able to become a captain on a large aircraft that they had. It was a 707. It was one of the first jets that were operated commercially, and they were still flying those. So I flew that also all over the world. And after that, I was hired by American Airlines. And this year, actually this month, October, will be my 33rd year as a pilot with American Airlines. And I've flown many aircraft there. And right now I'm flying the 787 as an instructor and evaluator. That means that I teach at our flight academy, and I also instruct and evaluate other pilots. So that's a little bit about, the flying background.
Increíble. So I just want to ask you, you've been with 33 years. Congratulations for American Airlines, but you're also making history, right? You're also making history with American Airlines as, a captain, and some other things. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes. There weren't many women when I started flying with American Airlines, and when I was hired in 1988, they weren't really tracking, what women, who was Hispanic and who was, different ethnicities. And we knew that there were very few of us. There's another participant in Latinas in Aviation, Olga Custodio. She was hired at American Airlines before me. I upgraded to captain, the first Latina captain at American in the year 2000. And then I was also the first Latina instructor, check airman, and evaluator. So that's a big honor for me.
Wow. So you're in the annals of American Airlines for this. So that's great. Well, let's talk a little bit about the book, right? So, and in your bio, you speak about how you secretly were writing poems. And obviously that is out of the bag now. But
yes,
can you talk to us a little bit about? Obviously, you enjoyed writing. You were writing for the Orange County Register, and how that kind of came about, and how that led to maybe this idea of a book that you wanted to publish.
Yes, I've always liked writing, and I like languages. I've studied other languages. The writing for this present project was really a result of COVID. So when all of these circumstances started happening, I wanted to find a creative project that would build community, and where pilots and their children and people who flew would be able to have a creative outlet. The children were stuck inside. So I thought, it would be a great idea to be able to incorporate some of this into a book. And the poetry already existed. I had started a poetry thread in an internal discussion forum for pilots. It's a private forum that we host on our union website. Pilots who fly for airlines in the US, the majority of them are unionized, and the union has a website. And I started a thread that was titled Morning Haiku. And the majority of the participants in this thread were men, and they didn't like it. So they said, what is this? What do you mean you're going to put a poetry thread in here? And little by little, they actually started to develop a taste for it, because haiku, Japanese poetry, is short, to the point, which is really a lot of how we communicate as pilots when we do our work. In the cockpit, we have checklists, things are short. We talk to ATC, it's short. And these emotions that the poetry elicited were beneficial for them. So I collated 5 years of poetry and curated that into a poetry chapbook, which I'm going to hold up here. So this is the first book, Beyond Haiku, Pilots Write Poetry. And children of pilots did all of the illustrations inside. So this book was published in December of 2020. and I was just advised that it received an honorable mention for the International Latino Book Awards for 2021, the first year that they've had honorable mention. So we were very, very honored for this. And this project is going to be 4 books. The second book was published this month. The launch is actually in October, but this is the second book, Beyond Haiku, Women Pilots Write Poetry. Now this one's a bit different. It's not a chapbook, it's a little bit larger, and it has poetry from 58 women in 10 countries, art by children of pilots, and it also includes poems that have not been published by the legendary Amelia Earhart. So I have poems in this book with permission of the Purdue Research Foundation that are with our poems, which is, to me, pretty amazing.
¿Puedes hablar más de haiku en español?
Sí, el haiku japonés es un tipo de poesía tradicional japonesa. En el metro de la poesía, o sea, la manera como está compuesta, son 5 sílabas, 7 sílabas y 5 sílabas. En japonés, eso es lo tradicional. Cuando se traduce a otros idiomas, a veces no mantienen ese tipo de composición. Y hace ya varios años que el haiku existe en muchas otras partes del mundo, porque se exportó de Japón. Hay muchos poetas de haiku japoneses que están considerados como maestros de este tipo de poesía. Y es un poema muy interesante porque realmente el propuesto de esto es que uno pueda tener una emoción que se ve en un momento. Y casi siempre un año. O sea, hay palabras, por ejemplo, palabras de verano, palabras de invierno, palabras de otoño. Ahora estamos empezando el otoño. Hay ciertas palabras en esos poemas que lo hacen pensar a uno de esta época. Entonces, no es fácil escribir haiku, pero es muy agradable. Cuando uno empieza a darle la mano, a mí me parece que es algo que beneficia a uno de manera interna, no solamente la manera de escribir el poema, sino lo que uno siente en todo el proceso del poema.
Well, thank you for that, and I think it's very important, obviously, to kind of explain that composition, that process a little bit more in Spanish, because it's probably something that, you know, most of the Latino community probably don't understand or probably don't know much about. So thank you for that.
And I may add, Kevin, that these books are all going to be translated into Spanish. The first one, el título del primer libro, se llama Haikus y más, poemas de pilotos. The second one is going to be Haikus y más, poemas de aviadoras. Así que all of this will be translated into Spanish, so they have a sense. And by the way, the translation was not easy. It took a little bit of effort. We had translators from Argentina, actually, who assisted with this. And I'm very happy with the result. The Spanish edition will be published for the first book this month. I'm hoping by October.
Que bueno. No, that's really good. And I think it's a really good inlet to have that in Spanish. And I'm sure that the translation was probably very hard to do. So I can't wait to see it and read them myself and read them to my kids. Linda, well, let's maybe jump into the book, right? Are there some poems that you would like to read and maybe share who the authors are and obviously share the illustrations as well? I think I'm pretty sure people want to hear these beautiful, these beautiful poems.
So absolutely. From the first book, the Beyond Haiku, Pilots Write Poetry, I'm going to read you, let me see if I can find it. So this one, the first poem in the book, which was, there's a lot of humor because pilots tend to have a very good sense of humor. It's usually dry. And this first one is by Captain Gerardo. His nickname is Flea, Gerardo Lamy. He's now retired. He's from Argentina. And it's a haiku. New Year's Day, had a bowl of ramen. Is this haiku? So that's, and this is the illustration for that poem. And that was by Kinley Johnson. She's from Texas. And that was to usher in 2021. So another one in this book that was very cool with the illustration. This one is a little bit more emotional of a poem. Hues of pink and blue, sun's parting footprints grace the firmament. So a little bit of bigger words. And this is the illustration by, I don't know if you can see it, Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
See.
Move it a little bit.
I have to do it this way.
Yep. Oh, wow.
And that one is by Fiona Pfeiffer. And Fiona is from Florida. At the time, she was 9. On the second book, let me read one in Spanish. How's that?
That would be wonderful.
See if I can find one that is very nice in Spanish. And then, all right, so this one in Spanish is by a first officer from Iberia. She flies out of Madrid. Her name is Lucia Aranega Aviation. And this is not a haiku because the books have haiku and short poems. Que tus orquídeas florezcan todas juntas por primera vez en la vida. Un amanecer sostenido visto desde la cabina. Un río corriendo frío entre tus pies desnudos en primavera. La poesía. Siempre nos salva la poesía. And the illustration for that one is by Isabella from Mexico, the orquídeas. So Lucia is talking about how she feels when she looks out of the cockpit. And she's translating that feeling into a feeling of spring and what a river or a creek that's flowing through bare feet feels like. You know, those emotions that you feel that are so amazing to see orchids on an orchid plant, all of them blooming at the same time. To me, it's a very beautiful poem. Another one by Antonella Mancebo, and this one is not illustrated, but Antonella is a young woman pilot from Argentina. And I met her when she arrived in Miami and she started to fly. And she wrote this, I guess this is maybe how she feels about flying in the future. Argentina, cuna de mi vida, qué lindo verte desde arriba, aterrizando el 787 con una sonrisa emotiva. So this is her dream, to be able to fly over her country on, you know, in this big airplane, smiling as she starts the descent into the airplane to land.
That's beautiful. That, I mean, when you read that, it just gave me the chills. And,
yes.
And maybe before you maybe jump into another poem, Linda, can you maybe kind of just share with us a little bit about some of the emotions and feelings that you get today when you're flying, and then maybe kind of like thinking back of like when you were 16 and learning how to fly?
I think that the feelings during flight, it's a little bit difficult to describe what it feels like to fly. And I actually discuss that in the book because everyone has a different, let's say, emphasis on these feelings. For me, you know, when you're flying, for me, this is my job. So, you know, that's one element of it, is that, you know, pilots are really good at putting stuff in a box. So, you know, you put all the professional aspect in a box and you do everything that you have to do and you do it properly. But then in the quiet moments of the night, when you're flying and you don't hear the radio and it's just you up there in the cockpit and you see how vast everything is and how amazing the world is seen from above, it really puts everything in perspective. And you see all of the wonders of the natural beauty that the world has to offer. I think that the feelings of majesty, of beauty, that's what I feel.
And did you have that same feeling when you were, a young teenager, learning? How has that feeling changed at all?
I don't think that feeling has changed. I think that feeling has gotten a little bit of polish, if you will,
Yeah.
because when you're young, and especially learning to fly, your concentration is such that the majority of it is directed to do the job at hand, and there's less available for you to focus on other things. And you're not as high usually, as a civilian, you don't fly in the same way or the same areas that we fly. However, you still fly in the quiet of the morning, and you still fly when the dew is on the grass, and you see what the beach looks like from above. So for that, yes, a smidge of that, much more now.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think for me personally, being able to, read the book and read the poems and just meet you and some of your fellow co-authors, it's really become an inspiration for me. Like I have this very like inspiration to learn as well, because it seems like there's this grace mixed in with this um, poise of just being in the cockpit. So um, thank you for that. Do you want to maybe jump into a couple more poems?
I would like to read one from Amelia and show
Sure.
you what this looks like.
That sounds.
So this one, now the poems that she had, by the way, a lot of them were lost. And how I found them in the archives was a little bit unusual because it required academic research. When you asked about feeling, I saw, as I'm reading the poems that I'm receiving from the contributing authors that were being sent in to me for the book, I'm seeing a commonality that, we're feeling very similar things. And then I started to wonder, well, did other women feel this way in the past? And that's how I started looking. And then I found a paper by the director of archives at Purdue about Amelia Earhart's lost poems. And I reached out to her. And then I was able to access the archives and see some of these because they have them all in digital images. This is one of them, and then requested the authorization to publish them. She didn't write about aviation. There's only one poem that I have in here that's about flying. The rest are about life.
Oh wow.
And about how she saw things. And these are 100 years old. They're from 1921. Your hair has gold in its glinting brown, and your chaplet over your gentian gown hangs citron and silver, swinging low. You are a princess of long ago. And the illustration for that was, see if you can see the princess.
Mm-hmm.
This is by Rebecca. And by the way, none of the illustrators knew that the poems were from Earhart. I couldn't tell them because this was our, quote, secret poet society. So they knew that the poem was 100 years old. And I gave them, all of the artists illustrate in their own style. And I told them that it was from a woman pilot, but I couldn't tell them who it was. And that they should just basically do the best that they could to interpret it. And when they found out that it was Amelia Earhart, it was a very incredible moment.
Oh, I can only imagine. I can only imagine. Can you, but maybe before you get into another one of Amelia's, could you talk a little bit about how the illustrators became part of the book? And
This is a very interesting question, Kevin, because I, from the beginning, excuse me, I'm a teacher at heart. My graduate degree is in education, and I love working with youth. And I've worked, in elementary schools and with different ages. So I wanted to be able to work with children in this. And in the first book, for the illustrations, I put out a request for volunteers and said, look, I called it a little book project. I need artists for a little book project. And within a very short period of time, I had maybe 18 artists, young artists, children of pilots who volunteered. So I asked them to send in a sample of their work, one sample of their work, so that I could, with their work, I could have a sense of who they were without actually having any more discussions, just looking at their work. And based on the work, I selected a poem for them to illustrate. And then I sent the poem to them or to their parents because, we're communicating with minors. So sent the poem to their parents. And then, that took a certain period of time for all of this process to happen. The cover, for example, the cover for the first book there's a reason for this cover. This is a young 10-year-old, one of twins, boy. This is Joe Gobbin, and this is Scarlett O'Malley. So this is male and female, and the red planet, there's significance for that. I talk about it in the book. So that combination of elements of design, of the children being able to interpret the poem and then put forth an illustration without any constraints in their own style, how they felt it. I thought that was pretty cool. In the second book, we did something similar. The second book has more advanced art than the first book. Some of it not as advanced, and we also have an adult artist, actually more than one, a professional artist from the American Society of Aviation Artists. She did all of the portraits of the 4 women pioneers. But the similar project for the second book, here we had volunteers, some from the first, that are in the second book as well. And then I wanted to open up to other children. So we did the same thing. I asked for their work. And then this time I gave them not one poem, I gave them more than one poem to choose from. So they selected, let's say, one of 2, except for the Earhart poems. And then they chose which one they were going to illustrate.
Wow. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I love the fact that you're engaging with youth, no constraints on their artistic, vision, and that's poetry in itself. So they're reading this poetry, and then the illustration is a poem based off the poem. So it's wonderful, and I love that concept.
Well, for example, the cover for the second book, which because of the lighting you can't see it well, but there it's much better. Now this one, all of the cover concepts are mine, but the illustration, of course, is the artist. This one is Callista. She's 17. She wants to be an artist. She has other art in the book, and she has art in the first book. She was mentored by Priscilla Patterson of the American Society of Aviation Artists. So this, to me, is an amazing cover. The butterfly itself, this is based on a haiku by a woman captain, American Airlines, and the haiku is what this cover is, and it's in the book. It's beautiful, and I'll read it for you so that you can see how Callista interpreted this. Little butterfly sunning on the nose cone of the jumbo jet. So that's the haiku, and the butterfly has a lot of other symbolism that's associated with it.
Definitely.
And it's a monarch butterfly, which has symbolism in and of itself. So yes, I think that element of this project is not only you have the adults who are writing poetry, and this is not a children's book. This is an adult's book. The children, I would say middle school to high school, yes, they appreciate the poetry because the poetry is simple. It's not difficult poetry. The illustrations are by children of many different ages, starting at age 7. Like, look at this illustration. This one is incredibly cool. This is, again, by Joe Gobbin.
Oh, wow.
So this one is about Mother Nature in aviation, how basically you can't mess with Mother Nature. This is a lightning. So, yes, very interesting.
I love it. I love it. Are there a couple other poems that you'd like to share with us?
So one other one from Amelia. By the way, this hasn't been publicized yet, so that you know that the poems by Amelia that have not been published are in here. I think there will be a couple of articles that are coming out, so you have a scoop. Okay, so this one, and then I'll read one final one in Spanish, but this one from Amelia, and just think about the interpretation of this. Now, this is an older artist. This is Sloan, is her name, And the interpretation, let me read you the poem. The light from the window falls on your becoming green sweater. With your brown hair and up-tilted nose, you are very American. So that's Amelia. And this is, by the way, she wrote them on pink cards. So look at, this is Amelia's writing, and look at the illustration that Sloan sees as very American. Isn't that cool?
That's beautiful.
I think it's amazing. So she's an engineering student, electrical engineering. Now she's 18. But that was her interpretation.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah, I love that interpretation because, you know, there is no American face, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
Great.
And then the book ends, Kevin, because I pay homage to history. I mean, we have Japanese poems in the first book. The second one, each chapter has a haiku by a Japanese master. One of them is actually an African-American, Richard Wright. He is considered a haiku master. He's deceased. I have one poem by him. And the end of the book is a postscript of a poem from the 5th century by Kalidasa, who is from India. And we have the illustration that you see there, which is in Devanagari script. That's the title of the poem, which is The Cloud Messenger. And this is a very long poem, originally in Sanskrit. This is a translation. And the pilot that I asked to do this, I flew with him. His name is Dipesh Patel. He is from India. And I reached out to him and I said, Dipesh, would you please write the script of this poem so that I can include it as art? And Dipesh did it in multiple colors, and then we picked what we thought was best. So each one of these poems and each one of the illustrations has a backstory. This is the most beautiful project I have done in all of the projects I have ever done.
Well, you know, I want to say thank you for sharing this beautiful project. And maybe this is a good segue for us to talk about another project that's going to be happening in a week and a half.
Yes.
We're getting to the finish line. And do you want to maybe talk a little bit about this, what's happening October 2nd, and how you're feeling about it, and maybe talk a little bit more about Latinas in Aviation.
So, el Festival de Latinas en Aviación, hacemos un poquito en español y después un poquito en inglés. Para mí primero fue una sorpresa de ver que se estaba haciendo un festival así. Segundo, tener una invitación para estar con todos ustedes y todas las autoras del libro Latinas en Aviación. A mí me parece que el formato del evento, la manera como se está organizando, la razón por la cual se está haciendo, todo eso es súper interesante y me parece muy instructivo para la gente que va a poder hablar con distintas mujeres que han tenido experiencias en aviación y que pueden compartir esas experiencias y sus vidas y sus deseos y darles inspiración a la generación que viene.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think, just an amazing event for the museum, and for the community, and this was inspired by the book. It was inspired by me, you know, when I arrived at College Park Aviation Museum and looking around our community and understanding that we had a very, very large community around us that, you know, we haven't really done a great job of engaging. And I feel like, just like what you echoed, that this is going to be an amazing event to be able to connect our local Latino community with pioneers in the fields, right? And not just that, but you and your fellow co-authors have an opportunity, or you're flying into the world's oldest operating airfields. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
The first time that we have, I think it's 16 Latinas flying into the world's oldest operating airfield. You're making history. How does that make you feel?
Oh, I think it's, I mean, what can I say, Kevin? It's pretty cool.
Awesome. Do you want to share a little bit about what you might be doing that day of?
The day of the event?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was just reading the program. In addition to, I think that there's, in the morning, there's a fly-in that occurs, and then everyone's going to gather. There will be introductions, and then I know that there's going to be panels where we're available to discuss and ask, have questions from participants, and a mentoring circle. I think that's what I read, that how the event is going to go. My intention is to be available, and I love surprises, so you never know what happens in events.
Well, one of the things that I definitely want to share is we don't want just to just be an opportunity where our community meets all the women, but we want you to walk away with something, and we're going to be giving away the books. We're going to be giving away, I believe, 250 Latinas in Aviation books, and so it's going to be an opportunity for you to not just talk, but walk away and share these stories, and hopefully be inspired by these stories. And the way that I look at it is, maybe you walk away saying, this is something that I want to do, and
Yes.
And maybe you can share a little bit about how maybe you remember your inspiration to wanting to become a pilot.
So is that a question for me?
Yeah.
About the inspiration, how to become a pilot? I guess that it's a bit difficult to pinpoint. To me, it was a matter of feeling. When I first visited the cockpit of a very large airplane, I felt that I wanted to do that. But I didn't see, there were no women. There were no women there. There were no women, and I was told no. So it wasn't only an inspiration to want to do it, but it was also an inspiration to want to prove them wrong at the same time.
How beautiful, how beautiful. Well, I don't necessarily have any other questions for you. I think this has been an amazing conversation. I wonder if there's been any comments or questions that have been posed through the audience. And Linda, if there's any other maybe final thoughts that you like to share, any other poems that you'd like to maybe mention. But I just want to kind of just share, Saturday, October 2nd at 10 a.m., we're going to be having this fly-in at College Park Aviation Museum, connected to the College Park Airport. And please come on out and see these incredible women, incredible Latinas, fly into the airfield and listen to their stories, receive a book, have these conversations. We're also going to have activities. We're also going to have a lot of community support. There's going to be quite a few organizations that are connected to aviation, being able to share resources, that if you're interested, that you have that support network. And I think that's the biggest thing that we want to be able to provide, is not just the opportunity to learn and to meet, but also if this is something that you're really interested in, that you have this support network that we're going to connect you with.
I mean, I think the idea of having a festival like this, and all of the work that it takes to plan and to put this forth so that people can enjoy it, I think it's pretty innovative. And I would like to thank you and your team for doing it, and for making it available not only to the people of the community, but for us, because everyone gains from something like this. The interactions affect both sides. So I see a tremendous amount of value, and I'm very thankful for the work and the idea and all the model of putting this together.
Well, you're welcome. I think as a museum professional, and I think it just as having a creative mindset, it's just like always thinking about like, I always think of my ideas as being very crazy, and then it's like, okay, how do we make crazy reality? Like, how do we make something impossible possible? And so I'm very grateful, and our team is very grateful for the willingness and the openness of all the Latinas saying yes, let's do this. And I'll also just kind of conclude with Latinas in Aviation was published last year in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. I mean, we're still in the pandemic, but and so this is going to be the first time that most of you actually meet each other in person. Is that correct?
Yes, and I know that, especially with my job, my time is quite limited. I know that there's discussion groups for the Latinas in Aviation. I haven't participated as much in those as, let's say, some of the other women. So I had even less contact. I've had contact with a few. Actually, one, Jacqueline Pulido, is a contributing author to the book. So I have her poems in this second book. Two of her poems are in this book. So yes, I've had that contact, but we've never met. And Jackie Ruiz, the publisher, is the publisher of the poetry books, and I haven't met her either. So I think I think it's like I said, Kevin, this is wonderful.
Well, maybe to end the program, if we don't have any questions, maybe you can give us a sneak peek of Jacqueline Pulido's poem, and Jacqueline will be there on Saturday, October 2nd, along with Linda and 14 other co-authors. So please come on out and be able to meet them in person. So what do you think about that? Maybe wrapping up with a poem from Jackie.
Yes, and Jackie, in spite of all of these, I'm going to read you. This is a very beautiful poem. It's short. It's a haiku. The other poem that Jacqueline Pulido wrote is a longer poem, and that one I'm going to save for the festival, but this one is a haiku. This is a poem about Jacqueline's mother, because when she first saw the cover of the book, the monarch butterfly was a butterfly that her mother loved, and her mother is now deceased. So she was very emotional when she saw the cover, and she wrote this haiku. Ready for takeoff. She fought the good fight. Keep faith. See you in heaven.
How beautiful. How beautiful.
And that is, so this one, for these poems that are so significant, we didn't illustrate these. We just had a butterfly there for her.
How beautiful. That's beautiful. I guess I see something in the chat. Private. Okay. We don't have any questions, and I think that's a beautiful poem by Jackie Pulido, and as looking forward to seeing her mother in heaven, and myself and our team at College Park Aviation Museum with the Department of Parks and Recreation for Prince George's County. We look forward to seeing you at College Park Airport and the museum on October 2nd. And please come on out at 10 a.m. We are still being safe, so please come on out with your masks. But we'll have a day of festivities, a day of talks and activities, and so I just want to say thank you to the Prince George's County Memorial Library System for having us and being able to not just promote the program, but obviously to highlight author Captain Linda Pauwels, and I'm excited. So I want to just say thank you all, and I hope you enjoyed this program. And thank you, Linda, for your time today. I know that your time is very busy. And I just want to say congratulations on all the accomplishments, and I'm very proud of you. And it's just been a pleasure, getting to know you and becoming your friend.
Well, Kevin, I thank you very much for having me. In the morning, I fly out to Tokyo, which is the land of haiku. So when I get there, I'll take a picture of the book for you and I'll send it to you from Tokyo. And thank you for all of this work. And to those of us who will be joining, those who will be joining us at the festival on the 2nd, we look forward to seeing you. I speak for all of us when I say that. So thank you.
Thank you very much.